share my screen because I have stepped in at relatively short notice. I don't have any slides. So what I am going to do, though, is give all of you permission while you listen, if you want. Use the time. If you don't want to watch my face, totally understand. Just use the time while I'm speaking to go off and just Google some awards and think about what you might want to enter if you don't already have a plan in place. I know that all of you who are on this call can multitask because of the jobs that you do. So please do feel free to split your attention a little bit, but use it for something that is related to what I'm talking about, and hopefully that will really help. So Alicia said who I am, Hannah Hamilton, Director of External Relations at Stamford. My content manager was originally lined up to do this talk, and she is our in-house expert. She's done all our award entries for us over the last couple of years. She can't be here today, so I'm really sorry. You're going to have no slides, and I probably speak for a little bit less time than she would have done. But now, what I do want to say is lots of schools are doing really, really well in the awards arena just at the moment, and particularly over the last few years. So we are by no means experts in this, but we have clocked up a little bit of experience, and I really hope that sharing that is going to be useful today. So just to give you a little bit of a summary, in the 2020 to 21 academic year, we as Stamford decided to enter a number of awards, and we were really successful. So we entered the TESS Award for sport. We were shortlisted for Stamford School. For those of you who don't know Stamford, we're a diamond model, so we have a junior school and two senior schools, a boys' school and a girls' school. We were shortlisted for the AMKIS Impact Award. And in the Independent School of the Year Awards, which is run by Independent School Parent Magazine, we were shortlisted for Girls' School of the Year, we were finalists for Boys' School of the Year, and we were winners for Independent School of the Year for Community Era Outreach. So that was a really, really good return for us on the time that we'd put in. So Rebecca Taylor wrote all of those. I've also written some in the past that have been successful. Success, I'll come back to this, isn't just about winning. Shortlisting counts as well, okay? So I've done award entries in the past for Independent State School Partnership, which was successful. And on one very notable occasion, I managed to end up with both my prep and my pre-prep going head to head as finalists in the TESS Awards for Prep School of the Year. That was an interesting table to be sitting on during the ceremony, as you can imagine. So don't take everything I say as gospel, please, but do please take it as a starting point if awards are something that you're thinking about getting involved in. Okay, so first thing, think about why you're doing it. Okay, so this is going to vary. It is going to vary depending on the award category that you're thinking of entering. So awards for things like sport or boarding or pastoral care are really good for marketing. They boost your reputation. They are providing independent endorsement, which is really powerful, and they can really help in making you stand out against your competitors. They can really reassure your current parents, and that in turn is generating more ambassadorship and strengthening your word of mouth as well, your single most important tool. Awards for things like community engagement are also useful in all kinds of different ways. They might have a bit less direct impact on recruitment, and they can, not here, but in some schools, they can be a little bit of a double-edged sword if you think you have the kind of parent body that thinks all of your time and effort and resource should only be invested directly in pupils. Sadly, we know there are, thankfully, a small number of parents who don't always see the charitable purpose of schools, but do just, as this is an illustration, you always need to bear your audiences in mind and what they're going to take away from it. Awards for things like the best senior leadership team won't have quite the same impact, and just be aware that the underthanked member of staff slaving away, doing a brilliant job teaching, running the chess club and taking the under 14 E team every Saturday in the rain might not quite see that award win in the same way as your jubilant SLT. So just think about all your audiences before you choose what you want to enter. Awards for your marketing, great for your career and great for demonstrating to your SLT that you're doing a good job, but just be conscious again of your internal audiences. If all you ever enter are marketing awards, you are going to upset a lot of people. So just be careful there. So there is a sliding scale of impact depending on the award categories that you're choosing to look at. Be really clear that a win or a shortlisting in the award that you're trying for is actually going to generate some value for you in return for the effort it's going to take. Whether or not it's valuable depends on your objectives as a school and your objectives as a team, but do make sure you have thought about that first. Okay, so now there are some reasons why you shouldn't. Okay, firstly, award entries can be incredibly time consuming. You can't just sit down and bang out 500 words. Increasingly, judges want detailed evidence. You're going to need buy-in from colleagues in order to get it. And in most cases, it's going to take hours and hours of time. Please do not underestimate it. On average, it takes us about a day and a half of time in the marketing team to put an entry together, and that doesn't include staff time elsewhere in the organisation replying to our pleas for information. Now, saying that, Alicia once beat me in an awards category, and she told me afterwards she just sat down and rattled it off. But it was an area that she had a lot of direct knowledge about. So for most of us, it's a big time investment. Secondly, they are increasingly competitive. A few years ago, it was much more common to feel that entering awards was somehow a little bit grubby. It wasn't really a very classy thing to do. And as a result, fewer people entered and you were much more likely to get somewhere. In fact, I have been aware in the past of award categories in which every entry ended up being shortlisted because one numbers entering was so low. Most people have got over that feeling now, and some of the big awards are attracting dozens and dozens of entries. So your chances of a win, all else being equal, are diminishing all the time. Again, just consider the likely value of your entry. Okay, so what you need to do first of all is think about how you go about assessing your value. First of all, you do need a genuine story to tell. They aren't going to give you an award just because you'd like to win one or because your boss would like to win one. So even if you do know you have a good story to tell, you do need to have the evidence to back it up. That means, sorry, doorbell. It's okay. We're just checking somebody's answering it. So you need evidence to back it up. That means you need actual facts and figures. You need examples. You might want quotes or testimonials or case studies. Outstanding boarding might wash as a headline in your prospectus, but it most certainly won't with a panel of judges who are expecting you to prove it. Gathering evidence can be extremely time consuming. You are going to be relying on busy staff to come back to you, and this is not necessarily going to be top of their priority list. You do need to plan in advance, and you do need to be prepared to chase. If you can't get their buy-in, it is going to be almost impossible to put something together that's really going to be competitive. And all the way through any award submission process, just remember the sunk cost fallacy. If you spent 3 hours sketching out your case and chasing staff and there's nothing coming together or the evidence is weak, please don't feel you need to keep pushing on with it. Just drop it. You can try again with something else. 3 hours wasted is better than a day and a half. Okay, now quite a lot of you might be sitting there thinking, I don't know if we have got a story to tell. Okay, I bet I'm not the only one in this session whose head has told them, go and win as an award for something. That was my brief. Go and win as an award for something. Don't care what. Sometimes, though, you just feel like there's no story there. Now, that's not only fine, that's an opportunity from a marketing and a product perspective. So your head, as an example, might want you to enter, say, Prep School of the Year or an award for your boarding provision. But if you know your provision isn't really up to scratch, it's not really award-winning, this is an opportunity to set out the reasons why. Not to the awards panel, to your head or to your SLT. It's almost an anti-award entry. We won't do this well this year because of X, Y, and Z. But in turn, that opens the door for you to say, but we can enter next year and we might do really well if we can fix X, Y, or Z. I mean, I hope there aren't too many heads who will only listen when there's a chance of winning an award. But if you do fall into that character category, this is a really useful tool for presenting a case for making improvement that needs to change in order to make the school more marketable. So don't be afraid to use it. The other thing you need to do is stop, take a step back and genuinely assess what's happening in your provision. So sure, you might not have a story. There are lots of schools all doing good jobs, and it doesn't mean one or the other of us is doing it so much better that we deserve an award. But sometimes we're so close to our schools that we can't see that the activities happening right under our noses really are sector leading. Maybe the story is right there in front of you. Don't try to create something out of nothing, but do be alert to opportunity. And remember, because I am personally really bad for doing this, it doesn't really matter if you know about another school doing a bit better or a bit bigger. Awards get won by people who enter. Don't claim to be the best if you can't prove it or if you know it's not true, but do shout about what you're proud of. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that grubby feeling. Okay, and it's if you're doing something exciting or groundbreaking, you would talk about it in a press release. You would talk about it on your website. You'd put it in a prospectus. Just remember, an award is no different. Remember, you're not going to win if you don't deserve it. So nobody would ever find out if you were trying to boast when you shouldn't be. They'll just know you were recognized for a job well done. So set aside any little niggling fears you might have about feeling grubby. No one is going to judge you for winning an award. Okay, so if you've got your story, there are a few things that you really need to think about. Okay, number one, read the criteria carefully, right? From this perspective, it's like a job application. If you don't tell them what they specifically want to know, they're going to discount you. Okay, most are very specific with their entry criteria, and this bit's a bit less like a job application. If with awards, if you don't meet them, just don't bother. Okay, none of us have time to spend on awards that won't even qualify for consideration. It is fine to ask them if you aren't sure. They generally always publish contact details, so do that, but do it right at the beginning. Don't start, okay, thinking, oh, we don't really fit into this. Most awards will have published details of previous winners, and they might even have published their entries. If not, you can sort of reverse research that by looking at the winner and then looking up their news stories on their website, because that will give you their details. Look those up and learn from them. In fact, do that before you do really get started as well, because it's going to give you an idea of the standard that you need to be meeting for that particular award, as well as the type of content that's likely to win. Now, because more and more people are entering awards now than used to be, generally the standard's going up every year. So just bear in mind, if you don't meet the standard that last year's winner did, you might be less likely to be in with a chance of winning this year. Now, I have judged a couple of awards in the past as well, and there's nothing, as a judge, there's nothing more annoying than somebody trying to shoehorn an entry where it really doesn't fit. As a judge, I'm not going to admire you for trying to bend the rules. I'm going to be annoyed at you for wasting my time, your time, and just trying to be sneaky generally. Just choose a category that fits. And if this award doesn't work for you, find another one. Okay, next point. Keep a careful eye on deadlines, okay? Give yourself enough time to collate and write the application. Deadlines are published really far in advance, so get them in the diary right at the start of the year when you're planning all of your activity, and set reminders through the year to look them up if they haven't been published yet. Give the wider team, that's the staff you're going to be working with, enough time to proof and to suggest any amends or any additions. It's a really, really collaborative effort if you want to be really competitive. Okay, and if you do want to be including quotes or testimonials or any other kind of evidence that isn't just something you can pull off the shelf, make sure that you are giving enough time for people to create those for you to go out and find them. Okay. On the bright side, though, it is really common for entry deadlines to be extended. So if you are having the day from hell on deadline day, do just check if the deadline is still midnight tonight, because you might have a bit more breathing space than you realized. Okay, number 3, think about who is the best person to write your entry. You are telling the judges a story. That's why my content manager is in charge of them here at Stamford. And that story needs to be compelling and often in quite a small number of words. It's often 500 words for a submission. Your director of sport might be wildly knowledgeable and really passionate, and they might have a sector-leading project, genuinely sector-leading, to shout about. But if they have a tendency to use 15 words when one will do, don't let them write the actual submission. Be concise and make sure every word counts. You don't want to use buzzwords or jargon or acronyms that only your school or a real specialist will understand. You don't know who the judges are. And if they don't know what you're talking about, they won't have time to play detective. Keep it accessible, okay? Evidence everything you're claiming. You need to prove to the judges you deserve the award, not just tell them, okay? And then proof, and proof again, okay? So number 4, can you illustrate your application? Actually, are you expected to? Can you submit, or are you allowed to submit photography or video to support your case? And if you can, do you have what you need? Okay, that's something that needs a little bit of planning. It's not something that you can just magic up out of thin air at 8 o'clock at night on deadline day. Are there other things that you can add to strengthen your award? Maybe examples of work that would be really pertinent in a marketing award, for example, testimonials, interviews. Don't send things that specifically fall outside the criteria, but do think creatively about how best you can present your case within them, okay? But big warning here, do keep an eye on your time. Don't let the time you're spending spiral out of control, because it's really, really easy for that to happen. Okay, number 5, allow time for submission. In the last few hours before the application deadline, websites have been known to crash because everybody's applying at once, because we're all busy, we all have days from hell, and we're all trying to submit our application at the last minute. So apply early if you can. If you're that organized, I take my hat off to you, but do try. It's also worth saving a document containing your full entry that you can, if you need to, email in before the deadline if the worst happens and you can't submit it for a technical reason. Remember to take a note of the contact email for the awards ahead of time in case that happens. Don't do it once the deadline has passed. This isn't about being sneaky and trying to get around the rules. This is just an insurance policy. If there is a technical reason why you can't get it in on time through the submission website. Okay, number 6, this is probably one of the most important things really to think about once you've got the work done. Have a communications plan in place if you are shortlisted or become a finalist or win. Okay, after all that wet effort, you really want this to make as much of it as possible. So think about where you plan on sharing the news. Is it going to be social media? Is it going to be parent newsletters? Are you going to tell the local press? How are you going to let your staff know? And particularly the staff who've worked really hard with you on the submission for that award. That's really important. How are you going to let the rest of your staff know? How are they going to feel about it? How are you going to promote it to prospective parents? Is that pop-ups on the website? Is that emails through your admissions team? Are you going to put it on your advertising? Are you going to let your feeder schools know about it? All of that needs a plan, because I can tell you that days from hell are just as likely to happen on the day that the award-winning winners are announced as they are on submission day. So plan ahead and get all of that ready in advance. You need to think about who's going to make sure all of that happens. Normally, it's a fairly straightforward comms plan and it's somebody in the marketing team, but just make sure it's all in hand. And plan in advance if you need to for anything that's happening out of hours. So if the awards are being announced at 10 o'clock at night, for example, whoever owns the main social media accounts needs to be ready to share the news at 10 o'clock at night. You know, they finish at 5, not that day. Okay. Now, remember, you are doing this for the publicity. Again, don't feel grubby. This is about being proud, okay? And even more, remember that in publicity terms, a shortlisting or being a finalist, that's as good as a win. You can shout about it. Everybody else will. It is fine to do that. Okay, number 7, watch out for hidden costs, especially if it's your budget that's going to get in the firing line. So this is really common. Hi, you've entered an award with us. You've been shortlisted. Would you like to advertise with us? What do you do? Really hard to say no. If I don't advertise, I don't think I'll win. Okay, now there may well not be a link at all, but you'll worry about it. Next one, you're shortlisted. Well done. Would you like to take a table at the ceremony? Okay, now that can get really expensive really quickly. So either make sure you're keeping an eye on your own budget and you've ring-fenced some money, or make sure you get on with your bursar and that they are prepared. A table, this wouldn't be uncommon. A table of 8 or 10 staff at the awards dinner, plus accommodation, plus transport, plus drinks, is a really lovely way to celebrate, but it really isn't cheap. So just bear all of that in mind and make sure that your head and your bursar are at least warned that there are hidden costs to going down the route of trying to do as many award entries as possible. Okay, so lastly, regardless of the outcome, it's really important to remember that the process of entering awards is really valuable. Okay, even if it turns out that you're not a winner, even if it turns out that it's not award worthy, or at least not worthy in that particular award on that particular day, you have almost certainly built up new evidence and new content that's going to give you a really strong story to tell. Okay, and you can use that internally and you can use it externally. So make sure, regardless of what happens, you put all of that work, make it work hard for you. You will have built closer relationships with the staff involved. So if it is a boarding award, you will have spent a lot of time talking to the boarding staff about it, working with them on evidence, maybe generating extra photos or anything else that you might need. Build on those relationships, keep them going, and just take that as a real positive. We don't often have the chance to work with staff on specific projects, and this is a really good opportunity to do that. So another thing, you might have identified areas where you aren't doing as well as other schools. And this is why it's really important on awards day or the day after to look at all of the shortlisted and winning entries, even if you didn't get anywhere yourself. Okay, you want to be thinking, why did they beat us? What are they doing better? Steal their ideas. I bang on about this a lot. That's okay. You can magpie other people's ideas, whether that's to improve your product or whether it's just to improve your award entries in the future. Okay, this is a really good learning opportunity. You can get so much out of looking at what other people are doing. Okay, short and sweet, but I've covered quite a lot there, I hope, and I hope it's been some useful. So I think we're going to questions now, Alicia, or suggestions, if anyone wants to share them.
Thank you, Hannah. That really was a quick whistle-stop tour through all the awards. And I've got a question. If anybody else has got a question, please either put your hand up in the room or put it in the chat. And my question, Hannah, is, as you've said, there are so many awards out there, from well-being to sport to music to drama. How do you, as Director of External Affairs, decide which awards to enter? Do you do a presentation to your staff, to all the teaching staff, saying these are the awards that are available, or do you just think, oh, I'm aware that we've got something really good going on in sport, let's enter the sports award?
Well, it can happen. It's a really good question. It can happen a couple of ways. Staff might spot something and come to us, which is great. We'll look at it and we'll work with them on it. What usually happens is that we will review awards and all of the categories that are open, and I will make a recommendation to our senior executive team, and I will say, I think we should enter this, or I think we should enter that, or I don't think we should enter that this year because we need to improve X, Y, and Z. I've said that before. I said we shouldn't enter this year. We're not going to win. We need to change things, and then we can have a go at it. And that's always gone down really well. In terms of choosing which to enter, as well as a good story, it should really tie into your strategic objectives. So if you are trying to demonstrate boarding and really boost your boarding numbers, winning an award for good boarding provision is absolutely massively going to help you. Okay, if you are not really strategically focused on I'm struggling to think of an example. If there's something that doesn't really align with your headline objectives, just bear in mind it's a huge amount of time and effort, and that might be better off spent really trying to generate revenue and get pupils in through the door through the other channels that you really want to focus on.
See, that's interesting hearing that last bit, because I was thinking, oh, maybe it's something where we should be going to all our staff and saying, look, these are the awards, what do you think we should enter? But I think you're absolutely right. You've made a really valid point, because you could get a really enthusiastic teacher in a certain department who wants to enter, and as you say, it doesn't fit with your strategic objectives. So I think that it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because you've got to get the balance right between involving everybody and finding out what's out there, and somebody might be doing something brilliant that you don't know about, but equally making sure that it fits in with the greater strategic plan. So I think that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to bear in mind there is that staff will be really passionate about what they're doing. They don't always have the big picture, not just for your own school, but also just for what other schools are doing. So they can get really passionate and really carried away about something that it may be great and really, really worth doing, but may not be all that unusual, or they may not necessarily be doing it to the standard that other schools are doing. We have in the past supported colleagues who've wanted to submit entries on their own bat. That's great. But as a marketing team, the amount of resource required to do this properly is enormous. So we can't, throwing it open to the staff room, we would then sort of damage relationships if we had to have those awkward conversations about, oh, that sorry, yours is not really very strong. People would get really upset by that, understandably. So I think it's important to be strategic right from the get-go, rather than being a bit too scattergun, because you can easily make people feel let down or unhappy if you go out and start talking about awards and then tell them that they aren't good enough. You're on silent.
Sorry, you'd think I would have got used to that, given I've been doing it all day. How many categories would you suggest that people enter? Say you've got a boss who says, oh, I really want us to be shortlisted or win a TES award, for example. You've got a range of categories there. I would imagine that every school probably has a few that they could legitimately enter. Would you give advice to say, look, just focus on one? Or would you say, well, why not try 3 or 4? Or would you say, well, if you've got something good to say about 9 or 10, go for 9 or 10? What would your view be? I mean, as you've said, I know that shortlists have changed. I do remember a few years ago a school that I won't name, and they were shortlisted in every single category and didn't win an award. And I always felt, oh gosh, that's, you know, probably cost them a fortune because they'd had to invite so many people. It must have just been like the most disappointing evening ever. So I don't know what your view is on how many categories you think people should enter.
This is going to come down to balancing how strong your story is and the amount of resource you've got. We entered 3 TESS awards last year. That took well over a week of work cumulatively. So, I mean, that's a huge amount of resource for a school to find, because these are incidental projects. They're not something that's ticking along all the time. If you've got the time and you've got a good story to tell, then I would say go for it. But I would say don't be spending time where you don't have a really strong story, because you will just that time could be better spent doing something else in your portfolio.
Okay, thank you. And we've just had a good question. Where do you find these awards? They're talking about obviously there's the TESS awards, there's the Independent School Parent Awards, and also what's your view on regional awards that maybe aren't for the sector but are for the local community? Do you see a value in those for schools?
They can be. I mean, that's really personal. So regional awards, we've got some regional awards here, which are run by the local newspaper. And that's great. But I think because they're not school awards, they're often tied into things like, I don't know, Team of the Year or New Initiative of the Year, something that's not school specific. And the idea of a big posh, because you'd be seen by like that by some people, even if you feel you're not, the idea of a big posh independent school going up against a local hairdressing team, who are the kind of people who often enter these things, you know, heaven forbid you win. What an awful message to send to people locally. So I think regionally, I would probably sponsor an awards category at the local area, you know, something that ties into my strategic objectives, rather than invest resource in entering locally. But that really depends on the local area. It really depends on the awards categories in question. Going back to the question of where you find them, TESS is really good. A lot of the awards are run, painful truth is they're run because they make money. So the TESS awards make money because they charge whacking great amounts of money for schools to come and buy tables at the awards dinner. They're not just running them out of the goodness of their hearts. They're trying to sell more copies of their publication, or they're trying to drive advertising sales, or they are trying to drive revenue in other ways. So you often find that it is things like schools magazines or parent magazines. The best thing to do is just to have a Google and just set up alerts anywhere that you can find them. So I think there is an argument that the bigger and more prestigious the award, the more impact it will have, and that's true up to a point. Certainly, you know, something that's very, very small and niche is possibly going to be, you know, not seen in quite the same way. I don't know how many parents know what TESS is, and I would bet maybe not very many. TESS awards, what's that? Who knows? Who cares? It's an award. So actually, an award, as long as it fits, genuinely fits, and it feels like an authentic fit with your school and with your objectives, I think people will react really well if you've done well in it, and they will celebrate that. I'd avoid anything too small where, as I say, you're going to look like you're sort of trying to shoot, you know, bully your way in, or you're completely outclassing everybody else. But other than that, just think about it as it applies to yourself. But yeah, just have a good Google. It's quite a nice Friday afternoon job. So take 20 minutes to this afternoon and do some Googling.